Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Season 1 of Living With Yourself. Obviously, it's kind of weird to kind of label this as a Super-Fanta-Fi, but it has a little bit of a science fictional angle, so we'll leave it at that. You know how a bit of anal retentive I can be about labeling certain things and categorizing things, but nevertheless, usually with these things I'll do the non-spoiler thing, which there's not really too much to kind of talk about non-spoilerize. It's kind of a fun ride. There's some interesting stuff. There's actually kind of a nice drama balance to it too. There's some comedy, there's obviously like science fictional angle, and there's drama, so it's like, hey, it's doubling up with Paul Rudd. So if you love Paul Rudd, so it's interesting seeing him kind of basically two different similar yet different versions of the same character and how the story ends up progressing from that. Obviously, I'll get to in more spoilers. So like I said, if you're looking for something a little dramatic but more so on the lighthearted side of things, I think this is right up your alley. So I'll leave it at that when it comes to the non-spoiler review, because to me it's just like that's all there really is to it, because I'd rather kind of just talk about the spoilers in general. So, but if you have not seen all of Living With Yourself, do not listen to this because it will spoil things for you. So like I said, going forward will be spoilers, so you have been warned. So it's interesting, many different things I kind of took away from, like I like a season where you're never really 100% sure where it might go. The fact of the matter is his wife Kate finding out about it, didn't expect that, and it's like halfway through the season she finds out, like episode 4. I wasn't expecting. I was like, wait, I mean, to be, it's just kind of like in such a reveal too, of like literally Miles is in the middle of a joke and then the real Miles shows up and he's like, he finishes a joke, he's like, oh, I guess it doesn't work as much if it's not coming from him. And Kate's shocked and everyone's shocked, and it's like, oh, how are they going to handle this? Oh, this must be your twin brother. Oh, you aren't going to introduce us? What's his name? Miles. So it's like, okay. And then you see Dan not really reacting, but later on it kind of makes sense why Dan didn't react. But we'll get to that soon enough. I'm starting literally in the middle of everything. I was curious to kind of dive into why Miles had kind of seemed like he was kind of like bored with life, or whether it was just like why it just seemed like he was so down and I think the season did a really interesting thing, because I was thinking like we'll get a real introduction to him at the beginning of the season. We didn't. We got a tidbit here before it led to the whole spa situation, which led to him getting cloned. I thought that'd be a bigger, like, okay, this is a run through of his life, how he got to where he is and why the cloning was necessary. We got a tiny bit of it. It's not till later on that we kind of understand how him and Kate landed where they are right now. It's actually kind of sad because a couple years ago, obviously they were married and everything, still are married, but it's like they were happier, and it's like Miles, because the thing is, new Miles is more so along the lines of who Miles was before. Obviously, even better in many different regards, because he has a Spider-Man moment of like, oh, I don't need to wear glasses anymore. My vision's actually perfect. Because it's interesting, because obviously they modify your DNA, the people behind this, who modify your DNA to make it even better, so regardless, the point I was trying to make was the fact is that like they were potentially starting a family, because it turned out Kate was pregnant, but they ended up losing the baby. I even love that whole conversation of being like, oh yeah, like the fact of the matter is avoid vaginal sex for like a little while. It's like there's always oral, this and that, and anal, and it's like, oh, you know what my grandma always say is like, I forgot what it was. What was she made a reference to? It was like something tri-anal or something like that, because she was making a joke. It's like, oh, when you get knocked down, obviously I forgot. I wish I could remember. I'm butchering it so much. But nevertheless, like, obviously a little bit of a lighthearted way of them kind of approaching the thing, whole situation. Their doctor was kind of an asshole about it a little. I don't know, because she wasn't very compassionate about it. Because even, Miles is like, is that it? And it's kind of like, yep, and she's on her merry way. But then it's like they move into the house that they live in throughout the series. And the fact of the matter is, it's like we can try again and start that family. I was like, if that's what you want, and having that baby for a little bit, it's like the earliest stages of like it. And the doctor even kind of saying like it wasn't even really like a miscarriage or whatever, because it was, whatever the case may be. So it's like it ended up. It was almost kind of like, oh, it wasn't even really fully formed or something like that along those lines, which I'm kind of like, it's kind of like a shitty way to kind of look at it like that, but whatever the case may be. I guess it was a way to kind of help handle the grieving. I guess it's one way to kind of, deal with it, to be like, it wasn't 100% a loss. I think that's how the doctor was trying to phrase it. But regardless, I'm going on a bit of a tangent, but it seemed like they wanted to keep trying to build their family and everything, and they were happy, but I think it just all kind of weighed down on Miles, because we never really got 100% a concrete answer of what went wrong. Was it working at what he considered a stupid job? Was it because it seemed like he was actually on top of it? He was the go-to guy, but then after that 5-year period, just something happened and he just kind of fell off. And then I guess like I guess also being afraid of starting that family, because like probably like that was their last attempt. Like she kept being like, oh, we want to go to the fertility place, or maybe they did try again, but it never happened. And then, you know, time went by and he became more and more scared. It's just like so much starts stockpiling in itself just because he was unhappy, but he couldn't figure out why. He was basically stuck in a long rut and he just wasn't talking to Kate about it. So it was interesting. I honestly didn't catch the fact that was Tom Brady coming out of it. But I don't know, my mind, because referencing Tom Brady in a TV show just makes me think of Preacher. If you've seen the TV show Preacher, you know exactly what I'm referencing, but it's just kind of interesting. And I just love that. It's just kind of like, wait, and the implications of what that means for Tom Brady. I love that. But what I really love is the fact that I was like, okay, so he's waking up in a grave and he's wearing a diaper and everything. I was like, oh my God, he's the real Miles. I was like, you were supposed to die, but there was a mishap with the gas, because you saw all those other graves. I was like, oh my God, you were supposed to die, and even explain it. Like, dude, the confrontation between Miles and new Miles is actually kind of neat. I like how they kind of structure this, where it's kind of like, you'll see one side of things, and then you'll see another side of things, and you'll see where they kind of came together. They'll fast forward through those bits a little bit, and then introduce you to new plot elements beyond the crossover between the two different perspectives. I thought that was kind of neat how the show was kind of divided up like that. If one episode was about one particular perspective, the next episode will be kind of like that, the continuation of that perspective plus that new perspective you got in the next episode was kind of interesting. Like, for example, when New Miles found Kate's profile on Data, and it's like, oh, that's so interesting. It's like, why would she have a profile? But then it's like, oh, you rewind, find out why she had that in the first place, and then the next episode led to both their stories connect. At the end of that episode, their stories connected with the meeting for lunch or whatever. I was like, oh, that's so interesting. Like I said, it's just neat how the story is kind of told in that regard. So. But I love the whole thing of kind of like, oh, one of the dudes, he having this strong Korean accent, and then he's like, wait, $10,000? What the fuck, man? And he's like, whoa, where's your accent? Were you lying about that too? It seems like the other dude, I forgot, he gave his name. Was it like Youngso? He had an accent. He even had a daughter, Emma, which I'm wondering, does that have some correlation? Because the fact is, he was living there, and then when the conversation about his wife came up, it's like that kind of, he got quiet, but then there's his daughter, Emma, which I'm wondering, is like, is his daughter Emma actually a clone? Like, what's the connection between Home Dude and well, because I think the other dude's name, I kept seeing, I think he's just referred to as Wright. I could be wrong. But the other dude who was using the fake Korean accent, because I love him being like, oh yeah, it was just so that you be more at ease or whatever, because you look at us as not people at all. And then New Miles is like, yeah, just like all the other people you killed, they're not people either. I was like, I like that you kind of retorted with that. I thought it was pretty nice, but nevertheless. It's an element to this episode. I mean, the show that I really like is the whole, identity crisis, that it's not just Miles who has one. New Miles has one as well, because it's like the realization, because it's like you woke up, because for him, he woke up and it's just like, oh, I feel refreshed. It's just like, I have all these memories of my life. It's like, oh, I'm being a good husband. I'm cooking. I'm doing better at my job. It's just, he seems like a much happier person. He's like more, oh man, full blown, high spirited, optimistic. Whereas the other Miles is just kind of pessimistic and cynical and just a little darkened. And it's just so interesting to see, like, New Miles kind of being broken down a little bit, but the fact is, I'm realizing, like, I'm a clone. He even looked down at his stomach. I was like, there's a scar that you're supposed to have, right? And then it turns out it's from his pancreas or something, right? He had gotten surgery on it, but obviously, because a clone, I guess, is a perfect, like, the clone is supposed to be a perfect version of yourself, so it's never going to have the issues that you had. So any defects a person would have had, the clone is 100% fixed to that. I did like they did go back to get their 60,000. It was supposed to be 50,000, but they also got the extra 10,000. I even love the fact that they're pulling their pants down, which there was a part of me that was almost wondering, is like, is New Miles actually going to have a bigger penis than other Miles. I thought that's the route they were going to go. I thought there would be a moment of Miles being like, why is yours bigger than mine? Wait, that's what they meant by, like, I thought that could be something they did, but they never reference it, so I'm assuming, like, they're exact copies in that regard. And I love he's bending over to take a look at the scar, and some lady's driving by, like, get a room! But nevertheless. And so, like I said, it's actually kind of like the show. Like I said, the show, it has, you know, it's humor to it, but at the same time, like, there is like a very dark element to this with the whole identity crisis, because like you have, hey, new Miles is basically playing the role of, hey, you gotta fill in for me at work, the proposals and stuff like that. It's like, oh, you're kind of the new shining star at work, so you got to keep that up. I'll stay at home. Like when it comes to stuff with Kate and stuff, like, you know, we never went too far down that route, but that was more where things kind of were. I mean, it was almost that messed up thing of like, oh, he put in the work of being the good husband, the life of the party, and it's like, oh, when she, you know, he's about to, you know, they're about to have marital relationships. Miles steps in and replaces new Miles. It's like, yeah, I got this because that is my wife. Which, if that wasn't, that can be, and she kind of brings it up later on, but that is a bit of a twisted situation if that were the case, because it would be a little weird of like, oh, new Miles, because it's something he had even thrown out there too about the fact is of like, oh yeah, he's never been like, because all his memories aren't his, so everything's a first. He's actually never been laid before, which there's the whole, what was it? The lady from where he works obviously has a bit of a thing for him. They kind of do their thing, and it just looks like she's kind of the one more in control. I guess because it is his first time and everything, and they do their thing, but nothing else kind of sprouts from it. I thought, oh, because it's interesting because he was going to tell like new Miles is like, hey, go out there, enjoy your life, get a new life and whatnot. But hearing Kate's voice made him not want to go. It's like, because it just triggered all those memories that were there. It's like, no, I have memories of you being my wife, like the life that we spent together. So obviously it was hard for him to kind of let go. So he wanted, you know, to enjoy that life. But it started becoming that thing of like, you know, it wasn't just, oh, I don't want to be here just for some of that life. Because, you know, because at the beginning, like Miles was like, the fact is, you're going to accept this deal because you want my life. So you'll accept whatever crumbs I kind of throw your way, which is kind of a dick way to kind of phrase that. But, you know, it's true. And new Miles accepted, but obviously he wanted more, you know, so, which, like I said, that turns into a complicated thing. But I like I said, I cannot believe that Kate ends up finding out she's sitting him down and they're both trying to talk and she's just like, shut up. And it's like, this is a weird situation to be in. And it's like, you were the one that was cooking me dinner, and you were the one that were telling the amazing stories. But when we were about to have marital love, he was like, no, that was me. I mean, thank God it was me, but it could have been, you know, so that's a complicated thing. And kind of seeing the other side of things with her kind of struggling, because she's been struggling with her marriage for a little while. It's kind of a little bit of a side story that I think is kind of interesting, but her friend, her business partner, Meg, they kind of have like that, you know, relationship where her friend Meg can be like a little almost judgmental, because it's like, oh, your choices or whatever. It's like, look at my choices, my life. Oh, you want to be married and settle down. It's like, oh, you're supposed to be a badass, which I'm like, it's like, I'm still a badass. But you hear from conversations where it seems like literally everything she was shitting on Kate about doing 5 years ago, she's currently doing. And it's almost probably messed up for Kate. I mean, I think whereas, you know, he has his own, you know, Miles has his own reasons to kind of internalize. I'm sure being around Meg and her life and everything probably like infuriates Kate a little bit too, because it's like, it's so hypocritical, because it's like, you talk so much shit about this type of life and you're living that and I kind of don't have that, you know. So I think there's kind of an element there of everything. There's also that situation where like he was supposed to give the presentation, because like obviously it's like a bid between his business as well as the other business of like, okay, so who's going to, you know, get this whole thing? Is it going to be the Hilson company that he works for or the other one? And to kind of convince a lot of people who weren't 100% on the Hilston train, because the whole point was to make it seem like, oh, we're just like you. It's about connections. We're friends, like treat us like we're friends and family. We're in this together. And he ends up telling this bold-faced lie about, his father and the farm and his grandfather. And I'm like, man, you were really good at spinning a lie. And that guy that was in the bathroom from the other company ends up pissing on his leg a little bit. That was interesting. I'm surprised that didn't become a bigger storyline, but I mean, that could be something later on, but it's just interesting. I kind of felt like that'd be something bigger, you know, regardless. sadly, the one kind of slightly out of the, main cast buddies he made was a dude, that Farmer Ray, which obviously that was someone that, new Miles had a bit of a closer relationship to than, our Miles. Because this Miles relationship is just all based on a lie, which even he kind of felt bad. It was about keeping your job and everything, because new Miles wasn't around, because new Miles was too busy off on with your wife, on one of her business trip. They had gotten away together, and which she was on the business trip, but she invited him as well, which they spent time together too. And it's this interesting thing, because for Kate, it's like, all the bad shit that kind of came with their relationship, it's kind of like, oh, we know so much about each other, but at the same time we can all borderline start fresh. So it felt good and nice. And then came the sex, which was super awkward. And I'm like, she's like, yeah, grab onto my breast a little bit. Not like they're squeezing an orange. And it's just like, it was just kind of like to be fair, in New Miles' defense, this was literally his second time ever having sex. So, at least, Miles had, it was, well, I think it was like 10 years of a relationship, so that was a whole thing. But in that moment, and you could start seeing kind of little by little where she started like not feeling it a little bit. And I was curious I was like wondering, like, my brain immediately kept going like, okay, so is it just because she feels weird because it's like, you're not my husband, and now the realization, I'm like, oh, you're not my husband yet. I'm kind of cheating on my husband with my husband, but not really my husband. And she kind of ends up explaining it later on. But there was that moment where Give It To Me Baby by Rick James starts playing. And they do that, like, apparently that choreographed dance from, like, their wedding or whatever. And she's like, oh, I can't remember the moves and everything. And it's just like little by little, like I say, you're seeing it stamp her up. And for her, she kind of finally snaps, because it's like, oh, he wants to go on a trip to Paris and stuff like that. They're running. They go for a run. Obviously, he's in better shape than his original self. So she's like, oh, yeah, I kind of feel like I'm about to throw up. So obviously, she doesn't accept the whole thing of him being like, oh, let's go to Paris. Matter of fact, let's sell the house and move to Paris, which at the same time, she didn't bring it up, and neither did he. But what about the whole, what about other Miles who's back home? What about that whole situation? Which that never came up in conversation, but I'm sure that's something we're thinking about. But for her, it's like, yes, you're great, but you're a little too great, and it's exhausting. It's like, how is me being great exhausting? Because the thing is, she's built this relationship with Miles. Yes, they have their very complicated history, but that's their history. You have all these memories, but I think you can think of it as like that baggage they have. They have this very like almost spiteful relationship in some regards. I mean, like every relationship has its ups and downs, and they've had many downs, and obviously, but like I said, they've also had their ups. But it's the whole thing of like, your memories aren't even yours. And even he I love him storming out, but then coming back later on, because it's like, yeah, I'm sorry about that. He's like, I've just never been broken up with before. Well, she's like, I know, I totally understand. So it's this complicated thing of like, yeah, you look like my husband and everything, and you're the better part of him. You are great in many different regards. But for her, she's kind of grown a little cynical. So she's angry. So she's like, you should be angry at me. So that's where the thing of like, the relationship of like, this is what we've been through the past 10 years. You might have memories of it, but you haven't been through it. You basically don't have, the battle scars from like our long-term relationship like Miles does, and I do. So for her, it's like, it felt right at the beginning, but now it just turned into a thing of like, it's almost like she thought this would help bring back her marriage in some shape or form, because it's like, oh, this is the better version of him. So, but at the same time, it just made things weird and awkward and complicated. So there's that. I kept wondering whether or not they would ever circle back around to that car that tried to like drive him off the road, the one that ends up hitting him and knocking his door off, which I love that never gets repaired throughout the entire season. It's literally just he just puts like a clear sheet there or whatever. I don't know what you would call that material, but I love that just being there. I also, it's such a small detail that they never make note of. Literally, new Miles literally got the exact car that Miles has. Just, which is obviously, I guess, it's supposed to be even a deeper representation of the new Miles versus old Miles, of like, oh yeah, I'm the better version of you in literally every regard, even down to the whole car situation, so. And I feel bad for new Miles, and I love how they do stuff. Like I said, they show perspectives of like basically Miles and Kate doing that, the dance routine, and which I gotta admit, that's some amazing ass choreography. Like that little dance they did together, I was like, oh, it was like super sweet and fun. I was like, oh, that's actually pretty dope. But yeah, actually, it's sad when you get the other perspective of like new Miles had to stand there and watch that happen, because Kate made a point to be like, oh, I don't remember it. It's like because she wasn't feeling it, so she pretended like she didn't. But the moment, OG Miles comes into the picture, oh, she remembers every dance step, which says a lot because that's a complicated ass choreography. So for her to kind of be like, oh, I don't remember, I only remember some. So that kind of, because they made it a little bit into the dance, not a lot. They went, but OG Miles and Kate went full blown. I didn't talk about it, but I was almost halfway expecting a clone of Kate to be made, but obviously they didn't want to do that. What was interesting is those dudes kind of bring up the fact, or one of the dudes brought up the fact is that they're bosses. So that's not something that they're working on, which that's something that's kind of interesting, like something that was never really talked about, but there is a higher cloning business going on. The fact of the matter is there's some like hierarchy to this, that they are like two lower range people in this larger operation, which maybe like going forward you could potentially kind of dive into that. But I thought that was kind of neat in that regard. And obviously, the final like confrontation between new Miles and OG Miles, and it's like he can't bring himself to kill him. And I thought that was so interesting. I don't know whether to really think of that as like a dark comedy thing of like, oh, I'm such a mess, let me change. And he kept buttoning and unbuttoning his shirt, and it's just like, and then like the fact of the matter is he tried to put a trash bag over his hair, and it's like I didn't know how to take that, as whether to take that as like very, very dark comedy, which I kind of took it as, but I'm like, I don't know if I'm messed up for taking it as that, But yeah, when the time came, Miles couldn't kill new Miles, and he's like, could you do something right in your life? And they proceed to fight, which I love the fact is because it's not like, oh, this is some like action-packed clone versus clone type of thing. It's like, no, they're basically two slubby dudes fighting it out. One's just a slightly better slubby guy than the other guy. At one point, like, new Miles punches OG Miles in the face, and it hurts, but for new Miles it hurt his hand. So it's not like, oh, we're some hardcore fighters or something, and they're tossing and turning and stuff like that. They slam their backs into the credenza, and it's like the fucking credenza, and OG Miles takes the axe and starts slashing into it, and he hands it to the other Miles, who also starts slashing into it too. So, which is kind of, maybe that means a lot. Maybe you can think about that in many different regards, because obviously that had a sweet spot because like the fact is it had like Miles plus Kate, carved into one of the dresser drawers. So that, there's a large metaphor you could look at there. I didn't talk about it, but I kept wondering where I recognized the actor who plays Hugh. He's from You, which is also on Netflix, but it wasn't originally on Netflix. I think maybe that version wasn't on Netflix. Whatever the circumstances may be, he's one of the dudes that works in the library with Joe. Yeah, that dude. I was like wondering, okay, also I love the fact is it's like, oh, we got a large variety of stuff, and he's like, wait, are you gonna listen while I'm doing this, Hugh? And he didn't give him an answer, and he brings it out and leaves the sample on the desk and everything. He's like, you could have left it back there. He's like, yeah, but I don't want to. It's like, we'll get those results back to you in a little bit. It's like, thanks. I also love later on Hugh leaves him a message. It's like, yeah, I got some bad news. Everything is good. You've just wasted 2 years of mine and your lives, because he just kept postponing it over and over, apparently for 2 years. So that's what makes me think at some point they did try, but it just never worked. So eventually 2 years ago, I guess it's like, oh, let's check and see. But maybe he was just self-conscious, and like, because I think that's a male thing of like, if you think your boys aren't swimming, like there's some like thing of like, oh, you're not a man or something like that. Like, I think that's something that's a bit of behavior that's kind of not in every male, but I think it can be something that could pop up in a male who believes like, oh, I have low sperm count, or maybe something's wrong with my sperm, whatever the case may be. Or maybe it is just the fact is maybe they had more repeat instances of a miscarriage, or just things not going through with the pregnancy. So But I did like, sadly, because obviously, and it's like I said, the dark aspect of this being that new Miles wanted to die because for him, he felt like there's no place in this world. It's like the fact of the matter is I have all these memories of old Miles, but I can't do anything about it because Kate doesn't love me. She loves her husband because I'm not her husband. I will never be her husband, even though I have these memories. It's like I tried to go out there, but my heart was always pining for her. Like no one else could compare. I mean, he literally signed up for Dater, and lo and behold, the one match that happened was Kate. So there is some level of soulmates and stuff like that, which I also love. Like his sister is kind of a little bit of a side plot in this. The fact is, it's like, oh, he's like, wait, you already knew about the clone? It's like, yeah, he came. He actually talks to me. I mean, it's like, yeah, I mean, didn't you get my voicemails? He's like, I didn't listen to it. I mean, he's like, honestly, I thought you were going on about the usual. Never mind. Like, the fact that matters, why didn't you text me? It's like, well, he wouldn't have ignored my voicemail. In fact, he wouldn't even ignore the call. He would have answered it immediately, showing that he's a better clone bro. As a clone brother, he's better than my actual brother. And I love how so okay with things she was. That's the really interesting. I want to dive more into that kind of their relationship, like why he is avoiding his sister. Was a relationship only like this for the past 5 years, just like when his relationship with Kate kind of changed? I wondered if the same thing happened with his sister. I'd assume so, but I'd be curious to see what their relationship was like beforehand. I also didn't talk about it, but like I brought it up earlier, the whole Dan thing, because it's like, of course Dan didn't know about the whole clone thing, because I thought he did, but it's like, of course you didn't, because even Tom Brady doesn't know about the clone thing, because they're supposed to kill the clones every time. It's actually supposed to be like dissolving them and stuff like that, but luckily, well, it's a combination of lucky yet unlucky that like I said, things didn't go right, so the OG Miles is still alive, so that kind of threw a wrench in everything. Like, it's like everyone, because it's like, Miles and, new Miles were back and forth about like, oh, you ruined my life. You ruined your life. The fact of the matter is you've got all this great stuff in your life, but all you do is whine and complain. So it's always that thing of like the grass is greener on the other side, because it's like, oh, he wanted to write a play and stuff like that, but then new Miles erased everything he had wrote, and it was just kind of like, oh, we're the same person, and I wrote something that was a little bit more exciting. It's like, oh, he did a better job at your job. The fact of the matter is your wife liked him more, so it's enough to kind of make you go, ugh. I'm gonna get back to it, but I did like the fact is that he did, get pissed off and kill new Miles, but did resuscitate him, which is also got to be a little weird and disgusting. I love him being hesitant to give mouth-to-mouth resuscitation to himself, and then like new Miles coming back and just like spitting in his mouth a little bit. It's like, ugh. It's like, yes, that's you, but it's still got to be weird giving yourself mouth-to-mouth. It's got to be crazy. And even them making up and everything, it's like, oh, I love you. It's like, I don't want to kill you. I don't want to kill you either. And the fact of the matter is, you need to stop. If anything, you should probably stop drinking. Why? Because you're getting a little bit of weight, especially around here. It's like, what? Fuck you. I love that being a thing. But nevertheless, a plot element I didn't even talk about and you circle back to is I was wondering, like I said, because the person after him in the car was like, okay, who is it? I kept thinking like that was new Miles stalking him, and then I was thinking like, oh, was that? But like I said, they did a slight thing of making it seem like new Miles is the one that kidnapped and put the black hood over his head, but it was someone else. So I was like, oh, who is this? At first I was like, is it the other competition company? Is it someone connected to this cloning? Technically to an extent, but on the opposite side of things, it was the FDA that kidnapped them. It's basically, what's her name? Weinrod. Her and her partner. Basically, this isn't their department. Well, this is a department that they're pushing because this is the investigation. So they're supposed to be looking into cloning and stuff like that because of, the message, the call that was left by New Miles at the beginning when they were trying to get their money back. And it's just interesting that was something that literally took near the end of the season for them to kind of circle back to. And I thought that was kind of pretty neat. And the fact is that they're trying to give him the detector at test, and it's like, what's your name? And it's like, yes, it's Miles. All right. And is your name Miles Elliott? He's like, wait, do you actually want me to answer it again? He's like, yes, and just kind of like the weird questions, because even the partner was like, okay, isn't that kind of like aren't these questions a little personal? It's like, oh, who's the first person you kiss? And I love, because that's a thing. I love that he's like, oh man, we were literally talking about this the other day, him and New Miles, and he still couldn't remember her name. And just like, I don't know, it was kind of interesting. There was almost like a little bit of a bond between the partner and Miles, whereas like Weenrod was kind of like a hard ass, and then brought up sodomy, and it's like, wait, what? So it's like, okay, who was your college girlfriend? Yeah, did you sodomize her? I'm like, Jesus, these questions. And it's like, okay, it turns out you failed the polygraph. Actually, the machine might actually be broken. So it's like, okay. And she kind of throws something kind of, once again, feeding into this whole identity crisis of like, oh man, I don't know if I'd be able to sleep if I couldn't really be 100% sure that I'm actually me. Which, you know, kind of got you thinking. And Miles is locked in a room. He starts drinking baby milk, and he's looking at parenting books and stuff like that. I thought it was kind of, I like that being an element to it. And the fact is, they're moving over to child vitamins because there's no proof of cloning and stuff like that. Which I'm curious to see, like in the future, I think we might circle back to that. Because this cloning thing isn't just allocated to just even Dan or Miles, which I still left off the whole aspect, because I was wondering, it's like, is the first body he's going to dig up actually going to be his own? It's like, no, it took a couple before he dug around, and it's like, oh. But interestingly enough, Dan handled that way better than I thought he would. I mean, to be fair, everyone kind of handled it their own way, because New Miles handled it in a sense of like, yeah, he was kind of shocked at first, but then he kind of went the flow with it. But obviously, he's still in the process of dealing with it. But, well, I guess you can call him New Dan, or can't really call him New Dan because he's the only Dan left now. And it's like, all right, let's do it. Like, let's clone brother it up, you know, clone friends and, you know, the ladies, yeah. And it's like, he's super okay with it. So that's kind of interesting. But Kate showing up at the end of being like, okay, it's like, you know, she's sorry that she broke this trust, but the fact of the matter is, it's a very complicated fucking situation. It totally is. And the fact of the matter is, it's like, Miles is her husband, but things get more complicated because she's like, I'm pregnant. And it's like, who's the daddy? It's like, well, it's hard to say. Also love, it's kind of a shitty thing of like, it's like, was he better than me? And she's like, what? He's like, well, was he better than me? And she's like, no, he wasn't better than you. He was actually kind of being like, she's like, actually, he was actually not great. Sorry. And it's like, and then he was like, but if that means I don't love that, because Miles starts thinking about it. He's like, but if New Miles is not great and he's supposed to be greater and better than me at everything, that must mean that I'm not great to begin with. He started overthinking that shit, which is like, that is how you would think about it. If he's terrible, she seemed like she was enjoying herself from what we saw, but at the same time, it's like, well, you know, but at the same time, it's like there's a deeper connection than just memories. There is that soul-to-soul thing, which that whole thing could be a conversation itself of like, well, because he's a clone, does he technically have a soul? That's a whole thing. And will he ever make a clone Kate, which maybe that won't be a thing now. But yeah, getting back to it, she's pregnant, which is like, oh, who's the baby daddy? And it's like, oh, I don't know. And it's just that weird situation of them hugging. And it's like, you see her there hugging both Miles, her actual husband, and New Miles. So it's like, interesting way to end off the season. That's, like I said, I like that they ended off on such a note, because obviously, like I said, there's so much more. Like, this is such a small story in certain regards, because there's so much heavy plot stuff that is such in the background. Like I said, like the cloning thing of like, there is a bigger organization to this. Obviously, there's a fraction of the FDA kind of looking into this. These two particular agents, which now they've caught wind of Miles. I think we're going to see more of that. Might even see more clones kind of kicking it. Well, we won't really know, because obviously, like, everyone else's versions are dead, but that might be a much bigger thing worldwide. Like, maybe that kind of busts right open going forward or something like that. Also, the thing of like, okay, everyone at work is under the assumption that you're twin brothers, so I guess you can skew that. Obviously, your sister's going to play along with that too. Conversation of their parents came up in conversation for a little bit, but beyond that, we never got too much. What about Kate's parents? Well, to be fair, like, there was that whole story about the fact is Kate came to here, the U.S. kind of on her own, so maybe her family's back home. I'm assuming Ireland, you know, that could just be an asshole assumption of mine. But regardless, So, like I said, there's just a lot of implications of this, like, this bigger plot that can exist in this world beside it just being like this small story, but them going forward of like, oh, like maybe he finds someone else. Maybe there ends up being a Kate clone that ends up coming up later on, potentially, you know, maybe it's a thing of like, well, because I'm wondering, because they could easily do a thing of like, I don't think they necessarily do this, but they could if they wanted to. They could follow someone else's story. Like it could be like an anthology thing, season to season, which I've kind of, you know, me personally, I'm not big into anthologies. They're cool and fun, like you know, because I'm thinking like something along the lines of American Horror Stories, like how that's a different show every season. Essentially, it's a new set of characters and stuff like that. Maybe similar actors in some many regards, but you know, it's something like. It's something, a show I need to circle back to, but I think it's just because in general anthologies kind of aren't my thing. I like a continue. I'm one of those people that's like, I'll follow a set of characters forever. So I'd be totally fine following Miles, new Miles, and Kate's story, especially like all this wacky new development. Oh, it's a guy, his wife, and his clone. Oh, here comes the baby coming into play, which obviously, you know, maybe that'll have, you know, if it is a clone baby, what would the implications be in that regard? You know, but it's like because they are so identical, I don't know there's really a way to really identify the new clone, you know, if it was the new clone's baby, was new Miles baby or OG Miles baby. So I don't know. Like I said, I mean, I would love to see what they would potentially do with the second season. At the time of me recording this, it hasn't been confirmed whether or not this is coming back for a second season. No surprise there. It literally came out Friday. It is Saturday night / Sunday morning at the time of me recording this. So no surprise there. Like sometimes Netflix will get stuff renewed like super early. Sometimes it takes a while. It just depends on the show and just their interest in bringing something back or not. Like I said, I would really love to see what they do with a second season because I think a second season probably get a little bigger, more crazier. You know, like I said, the circumstances of like. I'm curious that could be something they build upon them where like, oh, there might be a point later on where it's like cloning becomes such a, you know, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people, because like I said, we've got like the FDA looking into this, but the organization is probably going to want to keep this hush hush because those guys are probably going to have to report the fact is, yeah, some dude's actually alive and whatnot. And a part of me is wondering, are we going to get a clone Kate or not? Because that would be interesting to have new Kate for new Miles, but that might be kind of a weird situation in itself, or maybe he'll find someone else to fall in love with. Like I said earlier, keep up the whole twin brother role. But like I said, I'd love to see ultimately where they'd go with the second season with, you know, the show. Like I said, I expected it to kind of be even wackier and crazier. So I mean, hell, who knows? Because like a lot of the more dramatic, darker tones of the whole identity crisis thing is kind of out of the way. You can probably go full blown, like I said, crazy in season 2. But you know, I'd be so curious to see what they would do with it. But really, that's all I want to talk about. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.